All right, coming back at you again. First and foremost, want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashun Yahushua, Bashun Kakwadash. Second, want to give double honor to the Apostle Jim Mr. Well, our beloved elders, our teachers. And the peace, blessings, salutations to the hopefully elect that consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, West Indians. And, we are the 12 tribes of Israel, people that's been found, no more lost, returning back to our power and repenting in the name of Yahweh Shah. And those will soon we will be restored. And this is just some brief history on Babylon the Great. We have this notion that the so-called blacks here in America, and you also even have the northern tribes, which they look at so-called blacks as discussion, but you know, y'all are our brothers, and the what is it? We make up the 12 tribes. It's a disdain, it's an envy thing, and a hatred thing that's going on amongst Southern Kingdom and Northern Kingdom. Now, I got a list of black towns that were disrupted by the highway system. One of Esau's dirty history, which he tries to make out that so-called blacks here in America are a bunch of lazy, good-for-nothing criminals. The bywords. Let me see something real quick. Let me see what this say. All right, so what were some bywords blacks went by? There were a lot of bywords, slurs black people were called, especially during slavery, Jim Crow, and segregation, and most of them were used to dehumanize or mock so-called black people. Let me get this in Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 37. Byword refers to being a subject of mockery, scorn, or a proverb of ruin among all nations resulting from disobedience to Yahweh Bashim Rashad's commandments. Damn. So let's do this. Lamentation 1:1. How do the city sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become as a widow? How she that was great among the nations and princess among dealt treacherously with her, they are become her enemies. And that's, top, all nations gave us tribute. But now we're on the bottom and we give everybody else tribute in our hard work. So three Judah has gone into captivity because of affliction and because of the great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen. She findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtook her between the straits. So the ways of Zion do mourn because none come to the solemn feast. Only the elect are rehearsing the righteous acts, but as far as a whole nation, even our homeland, Israel, Jerusalem, our people don't go there. We are in our land. So it says, all her gates are desolate, her priests sigh, her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. Her adversaries are the chief, her enemies prosper, the so-called white man and the other nations, Africans, Arabs, so-called Arabs, Africans, Chinese, Japanese, and East Indians. So for the Lord have afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions, her children shall be multiplied. Let me go back to Deuteronomy. Every time, our people got some type of foot underneath themselves, the so-called white man did what? He came in and pillaged our towns. They gentrify, they take it, a mob, a Edomite mob comes through and burn the town down. So Deuteronomy 28:37 refers, it says, byword refers to being a subject of mockery, scorn, a proverb of ruin among all nations, resulting from disobedience to of Yahweh, Yahweh's commandments. So the curse, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whether the Lord shall lead thee. And now it's funny because all the history that the so-called white man has done to us, the history is you can look it up, but it's like it's funny because everybody knows the white man's history. He got America somewhat, but everybody overlooks what he has done to the so-called blacks, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, and so forth. And they just pretty much turn a blind eye to it, and they don't regard. Now here it is. Our so-called blacks have done a lot to contribute to the greatness of America, Babylon the Great, but that's not looked at upon nothing, you know. And ultimately, our glory in what we have done and what we had at one point, it's like it's of no regard. So here it is, the so-called white man, like the scriptures talks about, the accuser of our brethren. He, Esau is the real fugitive, but he has the whole world thinking we're criminals. We're the fugitive. But you got to ask yourself, how did blacks at one time have their own infrastructures, had their own dwellings, and all of a sudden, how did we become integrated? And now look at us now. Yes, we were slaves. We were so called let free, and to the point where they set up another system to break us while we were so called in this free condition to turn us into criminals. So they stripped us as everything, so they can justifiably call us criminals and do what? Have us in a snare and a trap. So it signifies a shameful reputation and public disgrace. And this is why so-called blacks have that public disgrace. Our image is messed up, Our image has been destroyed. And one thing for certain, our people feed into that system which does this, who signifies that shameful reputation and that public disgrace. The so-called black woman follows it, she feeds it with her madness, and the so-called black man feeds it with his madness. And also you so-called Latinos and Hispanics, you feed into it too. So it says, um, let me see. All right, so boom. Um, going back going back to chat. So what were some bywords blacks went by? There were a lot of byword slurs black people were called, especially during slavery, Jim Crow, and segregation, and most of them were used to dehumanize or mock black people. So, common racist byword slurs: Negro, usually officially used officially back then, later became insulting depending on context. Colored, common during segregation. Nigger, most infamous slur, the nigger. Boy, used to disrespect black men. Pickaninny, used to insult black children. Coon, used to mock black people as lazy and stupid. The buck, used to animalize black men. The mammy, stereotype label for black women as servants. Aunt Jemima, same idea tied to servant stereotypes. Don't forget the syrup. Sambo, used to portray black men as childish and submissive. The jigaboo, jig, mocking term, fucking jig, darky, mocking skin tone, tar baby, racist term tied to skin color, shine, mocking term, spook, racist term also used as ghost, Uncle Tom, used to accuse a black person of being obedient to white power. Slave era label, slave itself was used like an identity instead of a condition, property, stock, cargo used in trade and sale records, field hand, labor label, house Negro used to divide black people, stereotype based on insults, brute, used to paint black men as violent, savage, lazy. So there you have it. So here it is. We don't went from all these terms, and it still being used today, but differently. You know, nothing has changed. It has just only gotten worse because now our people believe and trust their enemy. You know, the gift destroyed the heart. So the list of black towns that the highway system went through. So here's the list of historically black communities, neighborhoods, or towns in the United States that were directly bisected or heavily disrupted by the U.S. interstate highway system and other major highways during their construction, meaning the highways were routed through these places, displacing people and reshaping their development. This list isn't exhaustive, many more exist, but these are well documented cases from historical and planning research. So, you got all these nations and, Myron Gaines and shit like that. They always talk shit. Always talking shit. Oh, the blacks did this, but not again, you know, the so-called white man has not done to you other nations what he has done to the Israelites because he knows it's so more what we have in store and is way more important and way better and more reluctant as if I'm saying that correctly than what you other nations could ever bring forth. And Esau knows, you know, he's a Hebrew Edomite, he's the biblical Edomites, and he wants that birthright. So see, the so-called white man knows he has to blot us out and control us and mentally have us in fear of him and serving him in servitude. And he pretty much has to cause us, basically give us that baby bottle so we can continue to sin and transgress because he knows our history and it goes back to that birthright. So a lot of people, the world doesn't know and understand what's going on, but the ones that have eyes to see, we know what's going on. So black communities disrupted or cut through by highways. Number one was Overtown, Miami, Florida, a historically black neighborhood. Because this is so, everybody is so used to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was way more. And these towns were thriving. Overtown, Miami, Florida, a historically black neighborhood often called the Harlem of the South, where Interstate 95 cut through and displaced thousands of residents and businesses. See that? So, you Edomites, man, you got some nerve when you talk your shit, boy. To Haiti, Durham, North Carolina, and I've heard, right now, Durham is known as a ghetto place in North Carolina. So Haiti, Durham, North Carolina, historically black community divided by NC Highway 147, later part of the interstate network, displacing hundreds of black families in the 1960s. So Black Bottom, Detroit, Michigan, a thriving African American neighborhood where Interstate 375 and other freeways cut through and essentially destroyed the community. See that? So these Edomites, I thought this was the land of the free or what is it? Options, and everybody has free will. We all have the same equality. You know, I thought this was the land of the free, home of the brave. Justice, democracy, love, and love, and love. No hatred. But what is this? So, 15th Ward, Syracuse, New York. And this is funny right here. Predominantly black neighborhood where Interstate 81 was built. And Interstate 81 goes all the way to Syracuse, New York. And you can take it all the way to Virginia, to, I believe, into Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. But I know you can go from New York, Interstate 81 takes you to New York, to Syracuse, different places in New York, and it cuts through all, I think, PA, and it cuts through all the way through Virginia, for sure. Was built through the heart of the community, displacing families and businesses. Serrano, St. Paul, Minnesota, a central black neighborhood demolished in large part for Interstate 94, displacing families and businesses and severing community cohesion. So High Street and 9th Street District, Little Rock, Arkansas. And so it's not it's not a coincidence. A lot of these places now still have so-called blacks there, but they're labeled the ghetto. They red zoned it. So it says, where am I, Salaki? High Street, 6 High Street and 9th Street District, Little Rock, Arkansas. Black businesses in residential district cut through by Interstate 630. 7 North Claiborne Avenue, Trim, New Orleans, Louisiana. Historic black cultural district devastated by construction of I-10, Claiborne Expressway. Sweet Auburn and Summer Hill, Atlanta, Georgia. Parts of these historic black neighborhoods were split by I-75, I-85, the downtown connector, and I-20, disrupting community and economic life. 9 is East Winston and High Street, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. US 52 construction cut through majority black neighborhoods, displacing families. 10, 5th Ward and 4th Ward, Houston, Texas. Portions of these historic black wards were bisected by freeway alignments, I-10, East Sticks Freeway. Number 11, Jackson Ward, Richmond, Virginia, and they label this as the projects. Well, you have a project here now, but really just the Jackson Ward area is really VCU really has control of this district now, and is used for a majority of VCU students and kids, the students there. And again, at one time, this was a so-called black area, but now the remnants of it is Gilpin Court, which is the project. So, once called Black Wall Street, bisected by the I-95, I-64 interchange. And I know exactly where that's at. Yeah, this man's a devil. Research notes, so once called Black Wall Street. So Jackson Ward, Richmond, Virginia. And Virginia has a lot of racism. One of the most racist, in covert racist state I've been. Very segregated, but overall a very racist state in its commonwealth. They're not going to let so-called black people get. Basically, what I'm saying is they're not going to allow so-called blacks to really get on any certain type of level, because the legislations and the policies and their infrastructure is not going to allow so-called blacks to get on the upper hand here. So it says, once called Jackson Ward, Richmond, Virginia, once called Black Wall Street, bisected by the I-95, I-64 interchange. Research notes freeway routing aligned through historically black areas. Bronzeville, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, while more associated with later infrastructure impacts, major highway construction displaced many black residents, mentioned in federal policy context. So let me see. Yeah, so context and how highways affected these communities. Intent and practice. Planners often routed highways through the least politically powerful because what we were vulnerable. So Esau took advantage. Parts of cities which often were black neighborhoods because land was cheaper and political resistance was weaker. So we couldn't overthrow. So we basically had to do what? Accept it, take it on the chin, and get the hell up out of there. Because Esau was in power. He didn't have no pity. He wasn't being fair. I thought, America was all about the, free and being fair, love and but when you really look at the dark history of America, America was never fair, you know. The America never how you say the America never restored anything to the slaves. Who was the slaves? The so-called black people. So it says because land was cheaper and political resistance was weaker. This led to displacement and long-lasting social and economic impacts. And then what was another thing? I read the book Dr. Claude Anderson, Dirty Little Secrets. The banks was on with this. Pretty much the whole system was for it. So eventually, what happened? Blacks. This was like the early 1900s, if I'm not mistaken. And then eventually, what happened? The civil rights movement, and then 1970s, the cocaine, the heroin, then they hit it right on the head. Then the crack in the 80s, and that just obliterated us. Thus brought gangs, the grimy era of the 90s, and then the softening and the homosexualization of the 2000s on up. Soft parenting, etc. Because of what the atrocities that have become of the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and the 90s, of all the injustice and the devastation that these legislations had on our people. Let me get this real quick. Um, Luke 8:17. Um, for Luke 8:17, but there's nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. And the scripture also talks about in Obadiah, how are the things of Esau searched out. So it says, meaning that secrets, hidden actions, or evil deeds will eventually be revealed or exposed. So this is what you're seeing in these last days, because one thing Esau tried to do was pretty much sweep all his dirty works underneath the rug. But everything is coming out on this devil. This man is not a Christian. This man is not a hero. This man is not, what he paints the picture as he is. This man is a devil. So a little bit more. Consequences. Communities lost homes, businesses, schools, churches, and cultural institutions, which contributed to segregation and economic challenges in the decades afterward. So there you have it. Due to us being displaced and moved, um, and it was a lot more than the highway thing. It was a lot more, but This is what brought about the civil rights, which was infiltrated. Um, this is what brought the heroin, the cocaine, the black exploitation era, to turn our people into criminals. Because see, this was, prior to the civil rights, these were our strongholds, and this is what Jake had. But due to the pillaging, just like you had the young lords, I always bring that out. The young lords, the Brown Pride, and you also had Gad that was trying to form an allegiance because the main focal point was the injustice that how our people were being treated here. But overall, America painted this picture as if, it's a loving country, but it's a very bloody one. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Those words edified. And with that, I'm going to say shalom.